JP Greer here from Sentinels for Christ for your Monday installment on November 20th of SFC 15 in the Word. My name is JP Greer and we are in the 12th chapter of Mark. And we just got back from an incredible experience with our friends at Catholic Church in Mexico City and had 4 days of fire talks on the subject of prayer, and it was absolutely amazing. The worship with our friends down there was amazing. The fellowship was amazing. And the presence and power of God was just remarkably rich. So thank you for all you who were praying for us. And you can catch those services right here on the webpage because they are translated from English into Spanish. So if you want to take the time to watch them, you will be blessed because we talk about prayer in a way where you really don't get normally in our Bible studies. And one of the things we do at Sentinels for Christ is we talk a lot about prayer. But I want to welcome Patrick from Rwanda and Hamid from Pakistan and Luciano from Madagascar. Anna, you ready? The 217 other people who have decided to follow Sentinels for Christ since last Thursday. So just welcome. Sentinels for Christ is a safe place for you to learn about Jesus, and we're going to keep it that way by focusing on Jesus because the world needs a cure right now. It doesn't need more ideas. All the ideas haven't helped the world out that much, right? So let's go ahead and let's dive into Mark the 12th chapter. As we come upon Mark the 12th chapter, we are in the second day of Jesus' last life on earth, or the last week of his life. He's gone to the temple. He knows he's going to the cross. And you will see that he deliberately stirs things up with the religious rulers. So Jesus was involved in his crucifixion in a way that is just hard for us to understand. But he simply was. And the conversation that they have today, you'll understand that it comes to a head to the point where they feel like, okay, they're going to get rid of him. But on day two, when he went back in the temple, the religious rulers straight up just questioned him and said, "But what authority are you doing these things?" Well, you remember what he did. He went into the temple and he cleansed it. He made a big ruckus. He kicked over the tables and he prophetically spoke and said, "Quit making my father's house a house of commerce." And he upset the money flow at the temple, which was probably one of the biggest offenses that he did. And he left the temple, and they were ready for him when they came back. And they were the authorities of the temple. So who was this rabbi who was coming in, kicking over their money temples, upsetting what they did? And many of these people were the established priests from the Jewish lineage. So if you understand that, then you would understand that they were ordained by God, by lineage, okay, by heritage, to serve in the temple. And Jesus was not. So that was another big reason why they jumped on him and said, "By what authority?" And they're really saying, "You have no right to even be in this temple." But Jesus, as the book of Hebrews tells us, is our ultimate high priest. Not from the tribe of Levi, not from Moses and Aaron's line, but the tribe of Judah. And he was a different high priest because it was a different covenant, a different agreement with God to solve the problems of the world. It wasn't going to be done through religious instruction. It was going to be done by Jesus' death on the cross. So right after they challenge him, and he says, "Okay, I will tell you by what authority I do these things. If you tell me, was John my forerunner's message from God or from men?" Well, they don't answer that. Because if they answered it, they would get themselves in trouble with the people. And Jesus jumps right into a parable right after that. And Luke's gospel records this as well as Matthew. And here is the parable. So, then Jesus began to speak to them in parables. A man planted a vineyard and he put a wall around it and he dug a pit for the wine press and he built a watchtower. And then he rented out the vineyard to some farmers and moved to another place. Now, at the harvest time, which was custom, he sent a servant to the tenants to collect from them some of the fruit of the vineyard he was renting to them. But they seized the servant, beat him, and sent him out empty-handed. Then he sent another servant to them, but they struck the man on the head and treated him shamefully. He sent another, and that one they killed. He then sent others. Some of them they beat up, some of them others they killed. He had one left to send, a son, whom he loved. And he sent him last of all, saying, they'll respect my son. But when the tenants of the vineyard saw him, they said to one another, this is the heir of the vineyard. Let's kill him, and then the inheritance will be ours. So they took him, the son, and killed him, and threw him out of the vineyard. Then Jesus asked a question, what will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and kill those tenants and will give the vineyard to others. Haven't you read the passage of the scripture? The stone which the builders rejected has become the cornerstone, and the Lord has done this, and it is a marvelous thing in our eyes. Then the chief priests and the teachers of the law and the elders, they looked for a way to arrest him, because they knew he had spoken this against them. But they were afraid of the crowd, so they left him and went away, because they're going to scheme and arrest him at night when no one is around. So the parable of the vineyard, it's pretty straightforward in that Jesus always used parable, or not always, but often used parabolic, allegorical teaching to illustrate a spiritual truth principle. But this one really is quite important because you don't have to be really steeped or learned in the Bible to understand who the characters are in this. Jesus is giving them a warning. He's actually reaching out to them, even though it's confrontative, and letting them know what is taking place right now, and they miss it, or they're simply not interested in it. Notice that the owners of the vineyard who have rented it out, when they see the son, they recognize that he's heir to the kingdom. You know, Psalm 2, speaking about Jesus the Messiah, the Father says in that psalm that Jesus, his son, will be heir to all things. So it's interesting to notice that because in the parabolic form of the story, Jesus says these people understood that the son was the heir of the kingdom and actually the heir of the vineyard. And despite that he was the legal right, they killed him and murdered him and tried to take away the inheritance. So the actions of these people are quite despicable, and really Jesus tells this way to reflect the human heart. But there's another aspect to it in that prophetically, these men understood that Jesus was speaking from the past about another very similar parable, which I'm going to read to you now. Some of you may not know of this. In the 5th chapter of Isaiah, Isaiah was an Old Testament prophet, around roughly 740 BC. Isaiah had a message to Israel because Israel, the nation, had a continued problem with idolatry, meaning they adopted the religious worship practices of the nations around them. And of course they did, because those religious practices let them give what they wanted to God and not what God commanded. Those religious practices let them participate in any type of sinful behavior as part of that religious practice. So they had adopted the religious practices of the nations around them. And Isaiah the prophet confronted them over that. And in the 5th chapter of Isaiah, I want you to just hear a similar parable, okay? Starting with verse 1 of chapter 5. I will sing to the one I love a song about his vineyard. My loved one has a vineyard on a fertile hillside. He dug it up and he cleared the stones, and he placed it with the choicest vines. He built a watchtower in it, and he cut a winepress as a well. And then he looked for a crop of good grapes, but it yielded only bad fruit. See the similarity? Now, you dwellers of Jerusalem and people of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more could I have done for my vineyard? And this is the prophet speaking in really the third person about God now speaking to the people, right? Then I have already done for it. When I looked for good grapes, looking for good fruit, right? Why did it only yield bad? Now I will tell you what I'm going to do to my vineyard. I will take away its hedge, and it will be destroyed. I will break down its wall, and it will be trampled. I will make it a wasteland, neither pruned nor cultivated, and briars and thorns will grow there, and I will command the clouds not to rain on it. The vineyard of the Lord Almighty is the nation Israel. Whoa, now you get it, right? And the people of Judah are the vines he delighted in, but he looked for justice, but saw bloodshed, for righteousness, but heard cries of distress. So we see in this Old Testament passage that there are different elements of the vineyard, but the vineyard is obviously Israel, and obviously an unproductive Israel that is apostate or not in fellowship with Yahweh, their God. And Jesus is saying nothing's changed when he tells these guys in his time, in his day, this parable of the vineyard. He just changes it a little bit to reach out to them and try and connect with them, that it wasn't just the vineyard that was non-productive. God was reaching out with passion, with commitment, trying to get the vineyard renters to change their ways, so that the vineyard owner could see fruit on the vineyard. And the fruit is simply the nation of Israel in fellowship with God, living the way that they were supposed to live. And that pleases God. But in the same way that the Old Testament refers to the priest being greedy in the 5th chapter of Isaiah, and the vineyard being destroyed, well, now we understand why on the first day when he went into the temple, he kicked over the money tables and stuff, because the same situation is happening. Do you know one of the most difficult things to do is to walk with God with any type of integrity, any type of commitment? Because first of all, life is busy, and it's always pulling us away from God. So how do we make God first? Well, one of the ways we make God first is we believe, okay? We believe that he is, okay? We really believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder. God is a rewarder of those, get this, who earnestly seek him, okay? That's Hebrews 11, verse 6. God rewards those people who are looking for him, who are seeking, who are pursuing him. And it's clear from both of these vineyards that these people were taking advantage of their relationship with God, eventually threw him away, and then were doing things on his own way and in their own way. And Jesus was saying that is going to be confronted. So this parable at the time of Jesus in the temple, remember, these are priests that he's talking to. They're the religious rulers, and they had a quite remarkable understanding of the Old Testament. So as that parable came out of Jesus' mouth, they knew that he was talking about Isaiah 5 and the judgment coming on them, which is why he gives them the ultimatum at the end, quoting from the psalm, the stone that the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone, and the Lord has done this, and it's marvelous in our eyes, referring to himself as Messiah, being the cornerstone. But you either embrace the cornerstone, which is a cornerstone is the foundation of a whole house, right? Then we have this parabolic example of God's people as a house again. Jesus is the cornerstone. So he's trying to pull these people into understanding him and not rejecting him. But he does speak prophetically in this chapter and tell them what is that they are going to reject him as Messiah and cornerstone. And as a result of it, we know that when we get to what is called the end times, or what some people refer to as the mini apocalypse, in the 22nd chapter of Luke, 24th chapter of Matthew, and then coming up here quite shortly, that Jesus says that just like the hedge that was destroyed in Isaiah's time, the vineyard got destroyed because God let the Assyrians come in and destroy the nation, because God got tired of the nation going, nope, gonna do it our way. You do it. You just leave us alone, God. Well, Jesus speaks about the prophetic destruction of Jerusalem in these few ending days down in the temple. So it's going to happen again. Isn't it interesting how history repeats itself, right? And God reaches out, and he's dealing with the same script, the same narrative, often when it comes to people. But I want you to notice the following, that he invitationally tries to draw them to him, okay? He really changes the part of the parable when he says people were sent to collect fruit, and then he narrows in on the Son. Because we understand from the readings of John's Gospel, when Jesus was explaining who he was, he always referred to himself as Son of Man. So those people in Mark would have understood him saying that he was the Son, and that by rejecting him, they were rejecting God's call in their life. So you're starting to get it a little bit more right. When we get together again, next Friday, we will do continue on. They're going to respond to this, and they're going to try and trap him with three religious arguments that hopefully they can stop him in and ruin his reputation, but they will not be able to do it because Jesus is the Son of God. So until then, I bless you. And may the Lord keep you. May he make his face shine upon you and give you